Well, what's up, Red Letter Leaders? It is awesome to have you in February's webinar. I've got a great guest that I will be introducing pretty soon. I just showed you who he was, but excited to have Rich Birch back on, and so I'll tell you a little bit about him in just a minute. So let us know as you're coming in who you are, where are you watching from, what church are you a part of? We would love to know that. Also, we're going to be talking about church growth today. And so feel free to answer the poll question. Did your church grow in 2023? Now, what does that mean? Does that mean worship attended, small group, whatever? I'm going to let you just determine what church growth means for you. But we got a few answers on the church poll there. And then I also want to start off the top with a great offer for you from Red Letter. We are in the midst of 40-day challenge season. In fact, this week, Lent is beginning. And so we had a lot of churches kick off a 40-day challenge just yesterday. But we've got a great special for you. What a lot of pastors maybe aren't recognizing right now is that with Easter being early this year, it's about as early as it'll ever be, March 31. Is there is a
just to increase the anxiety there, just to inject a little bit of anxiety.
Oh yeah, that's coming. But what that does represent is a longer window of time in that peak season, and so a 40-day challenge is a really great tool. Honestly, every year after Easter, but this year even better because there's a couple extra weeks to ramp up excitement before summer hits, and so we got a discount there for you. It's 10% off of orders. And there's no discount needed. That'll just automatically apply at checkout. But if you are thinking a post-Easter 40-day challenge, we encourage churches to get their orders in now. That way you've got 4 or 5 weeks to promote it and distribute it well to have the best experience possible at your church. With all of that being said, I want to invite or welcome, I should say, back to the Red Letter Leader webinar, Rich Birch. How's it going, Rich?
Dude, so good. I'm so pumped to be here, and I love what you do at Red Letter and your challenges. I'm a fan and a client. Like I've loved, been blessed by your resources and think they're just so helpful. And so I'm sure there's folks on that have used those and maybe thinking about them in the future. So anytime you reach out, I'm happy to jump on. So good to see you, Zach. Always
cool,
good,
man.
And always good to talk to people in Omaha. I don't know what it is about Omaha. I know I always say this to my friends in Omaha, but it's like all the best Christians in the world are in Omaha for some reason.
There you
I don't know why that is. It's a very strange, there's something in the water in Omaha.
Yeah, we, I don't know if you know this, Rich, our state slogan for tourism was Nebraska. Honestly, it's not for everyone.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought it was We Don't Coast. I saw one that said that, and I was like, or maybe that was Omaha specifically. Omaha, We Don't Coast, and I was like, that right there is a great little bit of copywriting. I was like, that's a fun.
There you go.
Fun things.
Fun fact, we were 50th out of 50 for tourism before that slogan 5-6 years ago. And we've moved all the way from 50 to 41 now.
Well, hello.
But Rich, they decided last week, it went in the news last week, they're going to retire that slogan and come up with something different. So we'll see what happens.
Okay. Time to keep them roll on. That's fun.
Yeah, I'll keep you posted. I'm sure you're on the edge of your seat,
yes.
with the Nebraska tourism scene.
That's great.
Hey, Rich Birch, you are the man. Rich Birch leads an incredible ministry called Unseminary. And so, church leaders, if you're not already listening to Rich and being a part of his ministry, you need to. The Unseminary podcast is one of the great podcasts out there for church leaders and pastors. And it's a weekly podcast. It's incredible. They do more than just podcasts. So get with Rich. He's an expert on church growth. And honestly, from my end, when I think about people that are in the church space that either have been a pastor or are a pastor that are serving, though, the greater capital C church with a majority of what they do, Rich is on my two hands, one of the top 10 people that I know of just being helpful for pastors and churches. And so he gives away so much free. And of course, it's his living. And so I always want to push people to get further in with you. But he is always so helpful. He's going to be helpful with us again today. And so super grateful to have you on today, Rich.
Sweet. Thanks for having me on, Zach. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm curious. We're on the day after the big Super Bowl here in America, and you are from Canada, Rich. So I want to know, like, is the Super Bowl a big deal in Canada, or is this another thing that Americans just think is the biggest deal in the world, and it's just like our nation that actually cares about it?
Yeah, no, appreciate that. So yeah, I am Canadian. Don't hold it against me. Although I mostly serve American churches, but yeah, the Super Bowl is a big deal. I'm not a huge sports guy, so I feel a little bit bad because I'm the guy that I was scrambling to try to get on Paramount Plus to see the halftime show. Like that was what I was trying to do last night, but it for sure is a big deal. Like it like things quiet down. I was out for lunch yesterday and I was asking the restaurant I was at, I was like, hey, you guys showing the game tonight? And they're like, no. He's like, it'll be really quiet. So it for sure is, it's a big deal. And, obviously even more so with Taylor Swift this year. And that's for sure.
All right. So let's get real timely here then, Rich. I want to hear from the church growth guy. We're a day after the big game. Is there anything that church leaders can or should learn from the crazy success of the Super Bowl?
Oh, that's great. Well, that's a fun question. The interesting thing about the Super Bowl is it's a big day. Like it is, and it's really cool to see when churches use that day to try to invite people to come to the church. So the thing that we've seen is that the difference between stuck and stagnant churches and growing churches is growing churches increasingly, even more so in a skeptical culture that we're in. I've said this in other contexts, every zip code in the country, or virtually every zip code in the country, is more unchurched today than it was 10 years ago. And unless we turn that trend around, we'll be more unchurched 10 years from now. And so, the reality of it is that kind of life has changed. We used to be able to do just kind of mass marketing stuff, but really we're seeing that not working as effective as it used to. What does work is our people inviting their friends. And so, and a part of the way you do that is you have to be engaged in conversations that people are already engaged in. Or one of the ways you do that is engage in conversations that are already happening. And so you can see, a number of churches have leveraged Super Bowl Sunday as whether it's just kind of the basic, like there was a number of those churches yesterday or over the weekend were posting that meme of Taylor Swift talking to her boyfriend saying like, hey, we're still going to have time to go to church in the morning. Come and see us, in the morning. Or whether it's something like at Crossroads Church in Cincinnati. I don't know if you know these guys, Brian Tome, fantastic church. For years, they have done a thing called the Super Bowl of Preaching, where they kind of play up the football thing bigger than anybody I've ever known. And so if you're looking for a church that is making kind of a big deal of it, they would be that would be a great church to look at. But what the mechanics behind that from a growth point of view is, we know that our people are already they're asking, hey, what are you doing for Super Bowl Sunday? Like your people know I don't watch football, and they ask me, what are you doing for Super Bowl Sunday? And so, man, if your church could provide, something that is Super Bowl related to inject into that conversation, it can stir, invite ultimately. And obviously we see the same thing happen on Christmas, Easter, Mother's Day. There are other of these kind of big days during the year, but lots of churches, I think, could take advantage of that for next year. Like, hey, there's if you don't make a big deal of it, and you thought about it on the Thursday before, the thing that's unique about that big day is, I can tell you, I don't know what the date is, but there's a specific date on the calendar next year when the Super Bowl is going to be. And so you can start planning towards that. And that there's going to be some sort of media circus, right? Every year, it's predictable. The culture for about 48 hours stops and pays attention to football. And so it's like, hey, well, maybe we should be thinking about that. And you don't need to do something crazy. Like you don't need to do the Super Bowl of preaching, but you could, even if it's as simple as the Jersey Sunday thing or something like that, it's already a conversation that people are having, leverage that, to try to, get people in on it.
That's cool. One of the things I know we did at our church in Florida that I always loved was we called it the Soup, SOUPER Bowl.
Okay.
And we had a guy that did he does a lot of the turf in the field. He actually does it for the Pro Bowl there in Orlando. And so he created obviously a small mock size football field for us. And we have fun. AFC versus NFC. And
love it.
People would put their canned goods that they brought in on which side they were rooting for, thought would win. And then of course we would donate the canned goods to the food pantry. And it was just a cool thing. that I think is really cool. The one thing I get every year this weekend, I don't know if pastors get it too, is every year I get somebody that sends me this thing right here that says, you should be as excited about church as the Super Bowl. So when your pastor makes a point this Sunday, pour Gatorade over his head. and it's the first time they've seen it. So I always got a ha-ha tap back, even though I've got it every year.
That is so funny. That's great. So yeah, it's on February 9th next year.
There you go.
Coming out of this weekend, if this is something you could be thinking about for next year. It's in Louisiana. So I think that's Central Time Zone. So it'll be, you've got to think about that from an, attendance point of view. What's that going to do to your, but yeah, I would think that's something you could look forward to for next year for sure. It's kind of fun.
There you go. All right, cool. There's some Super Bowl ideas for you guys. Awesome. Again, thanks for joining us for Red Letter Leaders today. We got Rich Birch, church growth expert and leader of Unseminary with us. Let us know where you're watching from and answer that poll question there if you haven't already. I see Roy from Florida. Dave says, what is there for tourists in Nebraska? Come on, Dave. We got a great zoo here, man. World class. We got the College World Series, good golf courses, but this ain't about Nebraska. We want to help people get to your church, not necessarily to your state. But anyway.
Yeah.
All right, Rich. Again, I just think you're such a brilliant mind. You've already talked, and we'll come back to talking about invitability and increasing invite culture, and that's Super Bowl, why we went there. But you just completed a nationwide survey of pastors. So tell me a little bit about that study, who was surveyed, and the key insights from it. What's up, Jonathan from Idaho?
Yeah, great to see friends that have tuned in. So yeah, this survey is a nationwide survey of executive pastors, and I have not released information on this. So this is like a Red Letter Pastors exclusive today. So if this is like breaking news, dun 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 dun.
Can I do some emojis in this? I don't know if I can.
Yeah,
but anyway,
absolutely.
I'm doing my own emojis.
And so to be honest, so we did this survey at the end of 2020. Going into 2021, and at the end of last year, I was thinking, I wonder what we would find if we basically asked the exact same questions of pastors. Kind of, where are we now 4 years later? Where are we? We're no longer in the teeth of COVID, or not really in COVID at all. And so where would we learn? And to be honest, so there was some stuff that was probably not surprising. So we asked a bunch about staff morale. Probably not surprising. People would describe their staff are more enthusiastic, more hopeful, less exhausted than they were, statistical average, statistical, significance of that, which is good. I think we feel that kind of health. Interestingly, churches are in 2020, 86% strong or strongly agreed that they had that they were more financially strong at the end of last year than at the beginning of last year. Interestingly, in 2023, that number was 96%. So, 90. So it had gone up 10%. So churches are feeling more financially strong, at least the churches we talked to. Now, interestingly, I would say, so those are all, I think there is, so as I spent a lot of time with executive pastors, and that bears out in the conversations I talked to pre-COVID. Zach, you're like a lead pastor kind of guy. When lead pastors get together, they'll talk about like, well, how many people attend your church or how many campuses you have, that kind of thing. When executive pastors get together, they say, so how many weeks you got in reserve? They talk about like, what is the financial reserve of your, of your organization? And for sure, we've seen that churches are holding more money in reserve than they were, pre-COVID. That's been an adjustment. And that's a whole other conversation. But I think you can hold too much, by the way. I think you can, I think if you, this kind of connects with some of that. Now, interestingly, I thought that on the kind of sad side of the equation, or not as positive, in 2020, 42% of respondents said that they agree or strongly agree that they were looking towards a church multiplication effort in the next year, while this year that number was only 28%. So a drop from 41 to 28. And I would ring the bell and say, friends, this is a problem. Your church is healthier now than you were 4 years ago. Your team is more rested. You have more financial resources. There is no time like now to think about, whether it's, planting a church, whether it's, launching a campus, that sort of thing. And this does line up. Like I talked to church. In fact, even just this weekend, I was talking to a church who kind of 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if they looked at all their metrics, they would say, hey, we should launch. But I think there can be a hesitancy that I think has come in post-COVID. I think we're still a little bit on our back feet, even though the kind of things are feeling better at our churches. We're like still a little bit more reticent, maybe a little bit more reticent to take risk. I think we've been in the broader economy. I keep joking that we're like we've been 1 month away from a recession for 18 months. Like, it's like we keep thinking it's coming, but actually, it's not. Now, maybe it's coming this spring. It's like, it feels like every turn, and that I think in some ways has held us back. And so my challenge for church leaders would be to think about, hey, are there like multiplication things that you should be thinking about? Is there, should you be launching a new service? Maybe there's that kids ministry, maybe there's like a new student ministry thing, or maybe, there's now might be the time. If 96% of church leaders are saying they feel like their churches are in a strong, or they're in a stronger position than they were a year ago, man, let's take a risk here and try to reach some people.
That's great. And I think that probably resonates with a little bit of the audience we're talking to now. Even in the poll question, I was curious what we get, because it's all across the gamut, I think, when you look at churches. But at least listening right now, we're talking to it looks like 88% of the folks that have taken the poll did increase somewhat last year. Yep. 66% say 1 to 15%, and then 16% plus. And so that's really good growth. And so I think that bears out with a little bit of the statistics, at least the people you're talking with. And I would say, Rich, are your pastors that you are surveying, are they generally going to be a part of churches that, there's so many pastors in churches. So are they, is it a certain segment of pastors or churches that you poll that would be more on the growth or mindset multiplication typically than the average, or what would you say? It
could be, obviously it's biased because it's people who have followed us in our channels, and we talk about those things. And it was, it was deliberately set up as a poll of executive pastors, which kind of by definition, is probably limiting the size of the church. We did a size. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but it does tend to skew to a little bit of a larger church, which is, that bias is towards the churches that I'm trying to serve. I'm trying to serve executive pastors. And so I wanted to kind of get a sense of where they're at. So, if you think about, lots of times a church needs to be at least a mid-size church before they start thinking like, hey, let's have somebody on who will take some of that load from the lead pastor. And so, so it might be a little bit larger, but yeah, we're seeing that. We're seeing, churches, like I think last year, it feels like, which is a positive thing. Like, I think I've stopped hearing churches talk about like, before COVID, like they've it's been a year since I've heard people say that, which is really positive. I think, we should stop trying to get those people to come back. We're not, are so many people, so many ago. Yes, it's so long ago. But it held on for a long time. Like people talked about it for a long time. And I'm like, okay, let's move on. We got people in front of us all the time. I don't know if this is true for you guys at your church, Zach, but like so many times when we talk with the leaders about, they'll be like, well, we feel like a totally different church. Like we have all these new people. We have all these different people. There was like a big mix up of people, changing around to churches and then new people showing up and, which is wonderful. So, interesting stuff.
That's cool. Yeah. So with that, and by the way, if you guys have questions, feel free to throw them either in the chat or there's a Q&A only section in there too. If you throw something in either one, I'll probably see it. And we'll either answer it as we go or spend some time at the end with a few of those questions. This one I think makes sense from Roy right now. He asks, because I kind of along what you were saying, I think is where this question's coming from, sounds like by and large, there are healthier metrics and marks. And yet there's, when we talk about wanting to multiply, people are kind of keeping that to themselves or keeping more financial reserves. And so he asks, are we restraining this? Is it because of fear of the future with increased costs of operations and offerings not matching those increases? Or what is kind of your hunch, or if you will, data kind of informs questions. And so the question I would have would be, what is kind of holding people back then, or keeping their money a little tighter if they are in a healthier spot?
Well, we're seeing, so I spent a lot of time on multi-site as well. And so there's another interesting metric in there for years. So there've been really good, consistent our friend Warren Bird has done such a good job over the years around multi-site and launching. And, this particular question was asking a multiplication question. And, for years when you asked churches what was the size of the core team that went and that launched the new location, it was always mid 70s, like 74, 76, 72, 73. And then the most recent study that came out last year, we saw it bump into the high 80s. It was like 88, 89, which percentage-wise is a big jump. Now, the great thing is I've joked with Warren and some other friends in the kind of coaching world. For years, we've been saying to churches, you need to have a larger launch core. We've been saying you can't, like, the success of your campus is based on the health and size of your launch core. And so I was like, well, this is people finally listening to us. But I think what it points to another thing, which is I think there is a shift in churches. That's a good question by Ray. A shift in our thinking in church leadership post-COVID, where we are a little bit more cautious, which I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. Like, I don't know. Jesus talks about, someone went out to build a tower and they have to measure, what are we going to do? Like, we got to think about this stuff ahead of time. There's, I think there is on some of these items, we can be too, we can lack faith and we're being ruled by fear and not taking a step out, and that could negatively impact us. But some of it is just like, hey, we're just being more measured, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, I have led in churches where we counted our reserves in days, not weeks. And, that's not a good thing either, right? It's like, you don't want to be, my challenge for leaders would be, yeah, okay, so we've reloaded. Like, no, there's no more pandemic coming. Like, you're in a healthy spot. Like, let's be thinking about what is that initiative to take a new step. What is the kind of next step you should be taking? What's the faith step that you think God, and it could literally be like multiplying from one service to two services. That's a huge step. Like, man, I got to find a whole bunch of new volunteers, or, it could be launching a campus. If you're, a bit larger, maybe it's launching a campus, or it's like, there's that person that in your church that they've been wondering about church planting. You're like, yeah, let's get behind them and help them, church plant. Let's take some new steps here for sure. I think now's the time to do it.
Yeah, that's good. And I see a question from Denise that I think we'll get into a little bit more the granular now of actual church growth that I think impacts any size. Yeah. And so, yeah, let's get into that then. With our world changing a lot, obviously there's some data that you've got that has been really, really helpful. But you are the church growth guy as well. That's how I know you, at least. I don't know if you call yourself that, but I call you that. Sure. Rich is the church growth guy. Sure. So in an ever-changing world, like, are there things that churches have done in the past that we should keep doing? Like, these are still things that if I want to grow my church, and obviously I'm coming from a standpoint that we're all in Christ, we're all in mission because we want to see his church grow, his kingdom expand, disciples made. And so when I say church growth, like, everything is healthy. It's a healthy mindset. So what if we want to grow our churches? Yeah, are there things that in the past we've done that we should keep doing?
Yeah, great question. Well, so there are, and this, friends, I promise this won't be just a sales pitch for my upcoming book, but there are these 5 areas that we talk about in this book, or that we've talked about in the past, that are the kind of 5 levers of church growth. And the first one is what we call shareable weekend teaching. And this really, any church, any size, it does not cost more money. It doesn't take more, it's not like some flashy thing, but man, we miss the mark all the time on this as leaders. And it's a real simple thing. It's, if people don't know what's coming up at your church, if they don't know what you're teaching on next week, the week after, the next series, it's very difficult for them to invite their friends. There was a study done by Gallup a few years ago that asked, people who attend church, it was actually religious, services. It wasn't just churches. They said, why do you come? And 3/4 of the reason why people come is because of the teaching. It's actually because of what those organizations are teaching on the weekend. And so if we're not telling people what's in it for them, for their friends, so like, hey, coming up next week, we're going to be talking about insert X. And this would be great for the friends in your life who are wondering about this question or wondering about that question. Do you know people who are thinking about these things? You should invite them to come next weekend. As simple as that tactic is, we miss it too much. We make people guess. It's like, when it's churches that preach based on sermons or sermon series, they'll have we've got an upcoming sermon series coming on, and it'll be like something super clever. You're like, that looks really creative. I have no idea what that's about. I have no idea what, why I would want to come to that. Right. You need to think about it from the point of transaction where, where your people talk to their friends. So how can I put the words in their mouth, the ideas in their minds, the tools in their hands that will ultimately help them have that conversation. And that really is at the core of, the difference between growing and stuck and stagnant churches. Growing churches train, equip, and mobilize their people to invite their friends. And, shareable weekend teaching, the first of those 5. And there's a lot we can talk about and unpack there, but really the baseline, it's like an aha moment. And it can be something as simple as if you're teaching this weekend and what you're going to teach on next weekend, which hopefully you do. Hopefully you know at least a week out where you're going. At the end of the message, pivoting to, hey, next week, this is the thing we're going to talk about. And this would be fantastic for friends in your life who are wondering about these things. Even something as simple as that, you can build up all kinds of other stuff around that, invite cards, all kinds of other things, but actually just keeping it in front of your people about where you're going. This is why big days at work. So this is why Christmas and Easter, one of the reasons why those work for people inviting their friends is because people are clear on Easter, you're going to talk about the death and resurrection of Jesus. That's, they don't have a question. Hopefully. They're like, I wonder what they're going to talk about. Hopefully, right. They know generally at Christmas time, good chance you're going to talk about the birth of Jesus. And so it makes it easier for them to invite. They have a clear sense of what they're going to go. That's why at Christmas time, people will invite their friends at Christmas because they're pretty sure you're going to sing songs that they know. You go into Walmart and there's, songs that are, a lot of those songs are playing on the radio still. And so, it makes it easier to invite. So shareable weekend teaching, that would be one of those, right. things I would be thinking about.
Cool. I think that's so great. And I think sometimes I feel like we can underestimate our worth as preachers and the content that we bring every week and how valuable it actually is. It's extremely valuable. God's word, every time it goes out, accomplishes what it sets out to accomplish. Mm-hmm. And so I think less from a pride standpoint or anything else, we just need to remember God's word changes people's lives and look to be practical. I think that's, one of the things I think in the shareable weekend teaching is we can teach awesome theology all day long. Right. And we ought to, and I'm trusting that the people that are on this do that already. But what is that twist of making it practical so that people desire to be there and know what that's going to do if they come?
Totally. And you know this, Zach, but that same study that found that 3/4 of the reason why people come is because of teaching. They asked those people, well, what are you looking for in their teaching? And it might surprise some people because the two things they said, the number one thing they said was they want it to be based on transcendent truth. People are looking for things that are, and you see this in the culture all around us. It's like, it's like I heard a guy recently talking about, he's like, this is why you have the back to nature movement. People are have chickens in their backyards and they it's like they're trying to eat their great grandparents, or I heard this guy recently is I'm making my own vanilla extract in my basement. Why do people do those things? Because so much is changing in our culture. They're like, I want something that is true, that has been true for a very long time. And that's true about the Bible at its core. These are stories that people have based their lives on for thousands of years. These are compelling narratives and, transcendent truth that makes a difference. But the second thing, and it was right tight underneath, so it's based on transcendent truth is what they're looking for. And the second is that it's applicable to everyday life. That doesn't sound like rocket science, but I think we can forget that sometimes, that it's hey, this isn't about trivia. It's not about do people really care what it says in the Greek? And I know sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you need to make that, which is fine. But the question is, okay, so I'm walking out tomorrow and it is, what difference is this going to make? I have sometimes felt in my particular tribe that sometimes our teaching it's at the end of it almost is like the teacher says, well, there's some interesting thoughts. We'll see you next Sunday. and we can miss the application. We can miss, we can miss where we're at. Jeff Brody, my lead pastor at the church I'm at now, he is so good at like driving to like super pointed, like, let's get to like a very specific takeaway that this makes a difference to you tomorrow. We need to do that. So shareable weekend teaching is super important. It's a critically important piece of the puzzle for sure.
I love it. And I've challenged pastors and church leaders too. I think we got to, let's talk church language a little bit. I think we've got some really great, effective preachers that do really well with the justification of God, but the sanctification in a lot of people's sermons, which is the practical, live it out stuff, leaves a lot to be desired sometimes. And as much as the teaching, like you said, is true, and we need that, we need to know how to apply it and what difference it makes. So I love that. All right. What are some other ones that you have? That was number one, you said.
Yeah. So, well, there's lots there. Things that are, this is under the context of things we've done that we want to continue to do.
We can still do. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I would say another, and because we're coming up to Easter, this would be an area where I was wrong. And so I'm not the hero of this story. So it's kind of a fun, thing to talk about. For years, I would say almost half of my ministry career, I was like, man, I want every weekend to be the most invitable ever. I know we talked about big days already, but I was like, for years, I was like, I almost poo-pooed, was like, man, that's a bad idea. People, when they would do these big days. And I was like, oh, that's a waste of energy. Like, I'd look at the church that did at Christmas time, they did the singing Christmas tree in our town. And I was like, they had like 500 people up on stage. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Or, and it happens, like, you'll see it this year at Easter. You're going to see like people will make fun of the churches that have like, Jesus gets pulled up into the ceiling and like, all that kind of like the circus stuff. Now, I'm not saying that your church needs to be a circus on these big days. But the thing that happens on big days is this. Two things happen. Your people are more likely to invite their friends, and their friends are more likely to attend. I ignored that for years. I was like, no, people should invite any day. Yeah, they should invite any day, but they don't. There are certain days during the year where they're more likely to invite your friend. And Easter is one of those. And there's lots of reasons why that is. But what we want to do is we want to put some extra oomph, extra communication, some extra effort into Easter, because it's coming up, to invite them to come to that experience. And and again, it could be something as simple as we're having a photo booth out in front of our church, and get your family photos on Easter Sunday, and you find that person who's a photographer at your church, and you take photos, and then everything else you do is exactly the same. You don't need to do some sort of crazy thing, but even a little thing like that gives an excuse to people in your, and then what you say is you talk about it for 3 weeks ahead of time, and you say like, hey, invite your whole family. It's a great time to get a family photo. I am shocked. I was at Disney World earlier this year, and I am convinced that there are a lot of people who their like core reason for spending all their money flying to Florida is to stand in front of the castle. They're doing it to stand there and get their photo taken. Like, that seems crazy to me. I'm like, you can get your family photo taken anywhere. We can doctor it up to make it look like you're at Disney World. But, the same is true with this kind of like a simple tactic, like a photo booth is like, hey, let's do something on Easter that's a little bit different. I would challenge you, if I was thinking today, I'd be thinking, hey, what could we do that's a little bit different? You don't need to drop Easter eggs from a helicopter, although that would be a great thing. You don't need to, have some, crazy thing, but you want to do something that will ultimately, and you think about it again, it's the kind of thing that people would tell their friends about. So, and the key there is eventful big days. You're going to have big days, but the question is, are they eventful? Are they the kind of thing that, people want to talk to their friends about? I'll give you something that's on the flip side of that, which is where lots of churches lose eventful big days, because you still got time to, is that good? Can I give you something there?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we think so much about, so you think about Easter, like, and I know what this is going to be like. We're coming through Lent, and there's a lot going on. And then, your church, maybe that week you're doing like Good Friday services. You're doing maybe Maundy Thursday. You're doing Good Friday. Like, you've got a lot going on. And then some guy told you to have a photo booth. And so you got a photo booth, you got like a lot. And then what's going to happen is the Monday after Easter, you're going to be like, wow, that was great. We had huge attendance. That was amazing. But then what? Like, where is you? So those big days, the focus of that big day needs to be onto some sort of recall, something that is saying to those people, hey, you should come back. So it's like the start of a series. It's come back to, we're giving away something next weekend. We're, in our kids ministry, we've got a special thing. We did this year coming out of Christmas at our church. We told our kids ministry people, we're like, hey, thanks so much for coming to our Christmas Eve service and this may not work in every market, but it worked in ours. I think it was like the second week in January. We were like, all of our kids ministry environments are going to have live animals at them. And so we literally had it was like Live Animal Sunday. And it was like, there was like rabbits and all kinds of fun stuff. And we told kids at Christmas, hey, come back and it wasn't called Live Animal Sunday. Was there some other better name? But there was like, come back for those kinds of things. Church leaders miss the recall. They miss hey, come back for this other thing. There's a church in Philadelphia that does this out of Christmas every year. They do a thing called Epic Days. The name of their church is Epic Church. Every person in the city is why it's called Epic. And they do an Epic Day every January where they give away a free t-shirt to everybody. And they say, hey, you should come on this day. And they'll say to their people, our pastor is going to make the clearest presentation of the gospel of the year on Epic Sunday. This is the day for you to invite your friends to come. And so they leverage out of Christmas Eve into that. Or we've done like a special speaker the week after Easter. So I'll give you a hint. There are these people out there who are like guys like Zach, who are like a great communicator who you should have come and speak at your church. Don't have them come on Easter. Have them come the week after Easter. Say like, hey, come back next week. We've got this amazing communicator, Zach Zender. He's going to, blow your mind. It'll be amazing. You add something for people to come back to. Don't miss that. That really is a key tactic that we miss on these big days.
That's cool. Now you're putting all this pressure on me, Rich, but no, that's good. But for real, that's a little bit of what we love to do at Red Letter Challenge too, with our 40-day challenges, is we want you to actually go all in on Easter, on Christmas Eve. And I know, like, as a pastor, I've went all in on those days, and I woke up on Monday kind of depressed. Like, I got to do this again on Sunday. What?
Get 6 more days.
And so let us do the work for you. Have 40 days of ready, done for you stuff so that you've got like a proven thing that's going to move your church in the right direction.
Yes. Like I didn't even think of that. That would be a killer time to launch a 40-day challenge. Like, so, people show up that Sunday. Hey, next week, we've got this great thing going on. Like, you should come back. It's 40 days on serving. It's going to be amazing. Here's a great trailer. And then you've got your sermons lined up. You got all kinds of, because you guys produce incredible resources to make all that so easy for people.
Yeah. And then you can spend the extra time planning to get the live animals there.
And then you got live animals.
There you go. I love it. Cool, man. All right. Give me 3, 4, and 5. And let's do those pretty quick so we can get into some new stuff as well.
Yeah, so captivating online conversations. This fits in kind of the new, if we wrote this book 15 years ago, we wouldn't be saying that 10 years ago even. But increasingly, the kind of key piece here is that growing churches, they don't just post digital billboards. They don't post like, hey, and they might do that, but they're actually trying to have online conversations. And so it's actually more about stirring discussion than it is about people just kind of seeing what, what you're up to. So that's number 3. Then number 4 is magnetic community service. So getting people out of their seats and into the streets, critically important. So we see this time and again with fast growing churches that they're trying to find ways for their people to actually make a difference, to make a tangible difference. The people in their community see it as a good thing. We see it as a God thing.
And Rich, then, on that one real quick, we just did at King of Kings here in Omaha 2 nights ago. And I know there's 700 churches, I think, doing it now. Night to Shine with the Tim Tebow Foundation. And I can't tell you, man, the amount of positive press and the big deal that things like that are. I've always said, like, I don't think that every community service thing you ever do needs to be, we need to tell the news we're doing this, but it's not a bad idea to have a couple things a year that you go all out for, that people want to see and celebrate you for your witness and reputation. And that Night to Shine is like one of those perfect events that everybody gets excited about.
Totally. Yeah. And that's a great example because, when you think about, there's really a double whammy happening at something like Night to Shine. One is people want to be a part of a church that makes a difference, but they also want to be seen to be a part of a church that makes a difference. And, when you feature like, hey, look at all this cool stuff that we did, it makes them feel better about their church, and they're more likely to ultimately invite their friends. And so, that's a huge deal. And then the last is appealing volunteer service, which is really so I wrote a book a number of years ago which Allison linked in there, called The Church Growth Flywheel, which is awesome. Wonderful. These 5 areas we're still talking about in this new book. I can't get off these, but this 5th area really is a significant change in that when we've stared into it longer, what we've realized is that growing churches don't look at volunteer engagement as an outcome of growth. They look at it as a driver of growth. So let's say if you're a church of 200 people, we'll say, well, we'll have enough volunteers if we get to 300. That would be amazing. When we get there, we'll finally have enough people to be in the parking lot or whatever we need to do. But actually, growing churches look at it the other way around. They say, if we want to get to 300, what we need to do is onboard some new volunteers. And when you think about this at the level of individual volunteers, if you can take someone who's not volunteering and get them volunteering, think about what that does in their life. It rearranges their agenda. You literally get on their, in their calendar. And when they leave work on Friday and say hey, when someone says, hey, what are you doing on the weekend? You're like, oh, I'm volunteering at my church. They're like, oh, tell me about that. And then it leads into a natural, invite opportunity. And typically we see a 3-to-1 ratio there. So for every one volunteer, your church actually grows by 3. So if you can add 100 volunteers, typically you'll see your church actually grow by 300, or you'll add an additional 200. So you'll end up being a church of, 300 people, or an additional 300 people total. And so we want to work ahead on, and there's a lot we could talk about there, but this is the mechanics behind multi-site. People were like, oh, multi-site, the reason why churches are growing is because they're going to new locations. No, that's not true. The reason why they're growing is because they're engaging new volunteers to go to those new locations. There are churches that are just taking people who are currently serving. Well, actually, this rarely happens, but if you just take people who are currently serving and plop them into a new location and not get new people to serve, your campus won't grow. You have to actually get a whole bunch of new people. And we see time and again that it's 2/3 of the people who go and serve in new campuses are new volunteers. That will spur new growth. That will actually drive more growth, at your church, which I saw in here. There was a question around hey, we launched with the ARC, with ARC initially over the last 2 years, and it sounds like maybe they're stuck. And so we're portable, meeting a local middle school. Spencer, feel for you. That's that's a tough place to be. I would start with the 2 things that we talked about on either end. One would be this appealing volunteer experience. Too many church leaders, particularly of churches sub 500, think, how do we make this less volunteer intensive? It's how do I get less people? I just, and we're gunning for we want staff to do everything. But actually you want the polarity to go the other way. We want to be taking things that would be done by staff and giving them to volunteers. And so it's how do we get more people on teams? And then how do we make that an even better experience? How do we make their experience of serving with you even better? And then on the very first thing we talked about, shareable weekend teaching, I would look really carefully at are we maximizing every one of those steps around your teaching? What can we do to ensure that people, know exactly what's coming? We could talk more about that, but that'd be a few things.
No, Rich, that's so good, man. I'm always learning so much from you, but that's probably my new key takeaway from this conversation so far is seeing volunteerism or servants or dream team or whatever you call them at your church, not as an outcome, but of a church, but more as an accelerant for church growth. That these are the people that, and it makes sense. They're volunteering. They're stepping up to new roles, whether it's leading a small group or helping in ministry or at even an event. And they want to tell their friends about it. They want to tell their people about it. And and the more they're invested in your church, hopefully the more they see and the more they talk about it. And so that's super, super really cool. So you mentioned these 5. You mentioned your not old book. It's not that old. Church Growth Flywheel. Great book. There's an online course that goes with it too that I highly recommend. And now you've got a new book coming out. So tell us about that book, what's different about that one and some of the things in the new one.
Yeah, great. So the new book is called Unlocking Your Church's Invite Culture. And So it's around similar topics. It's around these 5 areas. We're talking about these 5 areas, but I'll give you a little bit of insider kind of insight. When the first book on church growth, really, I assumed every church leader wanted their church to grow. But apparently is not true. Like there are church leaders that are not convinced that that's like an important thing. And so we spend more time on the why in this book. We spend more time kind of unpacking, what does that look like? The title, Unlocking Your Church's Invite Culture. I'm convinced that God has wired us to want to make a difference. We want to be a part of something that is impacting our culture. And so it's not like, this isn't about you kind of importing something on your people. It's already resonant within them. It really is, there's really a discipleship thing that has to happen with our people to be like, hey, let's uncover what's already there in you. And it's also a stronger focus on culture rather than tactics. So although we get into a lot of tactics, we talk a lot about, I'll give you all kinds of examples, 24 churches we give you examples from and all kinds of stuff like that, which I love writing about. But I'm convinced over, staring at churches for all these years around these issues that it really is about that train, equip, and motivate. You've got to consistently work on the culture side of it, which is, and like some of that is like, you get your elders or whoever your senior leaders are together and you say, okay, so who are the people that you could invite? If we were going to get on the phone right now and invite someone to come this weekend, who's the person that you would feel comfortable doing that with? In fact, let's actually do that right now. We're going to get on the phone. And if your key leaders or elders at that moment can't answer that question, they're like, I don't know who I would invite. I don't have somebody who I'm actively in a relationship with, that I'm investing in that relationship. I'm inviting them and ultimately trying to involve them in my life. If I don't have those kinds of relationships, that's a problem. It doesn't matter how many flyers we print. We've got to work harder on the culture piece. And so, the book takes a bit more focus around, and it gives all kinds of practical handles around, ultimately, how do we increase that invite culture? What do we do? And it's 1,000,001 small steps. Like even just that piece we talked about volunteers there. So we talk about in the book, the new here to new volunteer pathway or pipeline that we have to, that is a key. Sometimes I think we think that's like closing the back door kind of thing. That's like a back door function, but actually it's a front door function. It's like most churches have guests arriving at their church, and they have more guests arriving at their church than they're getting connected. Yeah. And we have to take responsibility to ultimately try to convert those people into people who are like actively engaged and wanting to invite their friends to our church. And that's moving them from being a new here guest ultimately to a new volunteer. What does that look like? How do we do that? We want to think really carefully around those steps, and and it's not rocket science, but we do have to think intentionally about those pieces of the puzzle.
It's good. And yeah, to kind of help frame all this a little bit for everybody too, like the very stuff we've been talking about, yes. Right? The shareable weekend teaching, the having big day events, the night to shine sort of stuff that we've talked about. All of that is because your people will talk about it. And I've heard you say, Rich, before, the number one key to church growth is invitability. Yes. And so if our people are talking about it, if our people are inviting, that is the number one key. I've heard from Rich Birch to church growth. And so we need to do everything we can to arm, equip, like you said, in your words, train, equip, and motivate our people to invite. That at the end of the day is going to be how churches grow. And so it's our job as church leaders to make that as easily possible and practical in the lives of our people. And so, Rich, tell me a little more, like, when's the book coming out? What can church leaders expect from it? And anything more you want to double down on what I just said on the importance of invite culture?
No, you've hit a nail on the head there for sure. Like at the end of the day, we have to think about everything we do through the lens of, or someone on your team, it might not be you, but someone on your team needs to be thinking about, okay, how are we framing this in a way so that our people will ultimately want to, invite their friends. I was talking to a church leader recently, And this is like a guy who's been around for a long time in a lot of churches. And they asked the question, or in the audience we were in asked the question, what's the greatest dampener? They asked the negative question, like the greatest dampener of evangelistic culture, or what I would say is invite culture. And this leader said, it's preaching that doesn't connect to the real world, that it's like there can be people who, all you're doing is thinking about filling people's heads rather than moving them ultimately to action. And so we want to work a lot on the train, equip, and motivate. It's all three of those. We have to do training with people. We have to, we have to actually talk about it, teach on it, figure out and another kind of big day example, the week before Easter, the week before Christmas, the week before Mother's Day, before whatever your big days are, those typically are like low unchurched Sundays. Like people, if you're like, think about it, if you don't normally attend church and you're thinking about coming to church this year, you're not coming week before Easter. You're not coming the week before Christmas. You're just not. Like, it's like, I'm wait till next week. Man, that's a great Sunday to teach on why you should invite people to come next weekend, because obviously you want to be careful about how you do that. But I can tell you those weekends, you have a lower percent of unchurched people in your room. And so obviously have to do that in an elegant way, but let's take the advantage of that. So the book comes out in early March. But you can, if you drop by unlockinviteculture.com, you can get on the wait list to get a whatever when it first comes out, which is wonderful. I wanted to give Zach, we were talking about this beforehand, but I want to give the people who are on this. So in the book, when you buy the book, there's 9 chapters, and each chapter has a different content upgrade, or has a tool, a test, a checklist. There's actually a 4-part video series we include. Like, there's all these different kind of digital resources that we provide. And one of them is called the Invite Culture Litmus Test. And what this comes from talking to dozens, maybe hundreds of churches about, they'll be like, well, how do I know kind of what's the benchmark? What are the benchmarks that we're like, is our church even on, for reaching, like, how do we measure our invite culture? And so there are 3 numbers that we've used time and again to help people understand what they are. And so we'll send this to you, and cool. It's real easy. It's like simple math. I did not do well in high school math, so this is not, most church leaders will know or be able to access these numbers quickly. But what it does is that you look at those numbers, and then we give you a benchmark. We say, like, hey, if you're in this range, then you're kind of at industry average, or what we would say is like, hey, it's good, or like, maybe you need to spend some more time in that area. So we'll send that out to people who are registered, and you take a look at it. That is, that's one of the chapters kind of content upgrades that we'll just give to you for free because Zach's a great guy. No,
you're a great guy. You're the one giving it away, dude. So you're the great guy. So yeah, to be clear on that, I'll follow up. We'll follow up with everybody right after this. In the next hour, we'll send you an email that has that file. And here's, since I'm the challenge guy, here's my challenge. All right, find and get whatever numbers you can get from that litmus test now. So do that today, tomorrow, this week. Get that done. And again, you all know this, Easter's coming March 31. And so what is one of the 3 numbers at least that you can improve on, do something tangibly and practically for this Easter? I know there's going to be things in there because Rich is always really practical with that. So we'll email that. Rich, can I also throw that in my Facebook Red Letter Leaders group as a file?
Yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah, that's great.
Awesome. So it'll be there as well. So I'll put the link to the Red Letter Leaders group there. If you're not in that already, that's where we're having some good discussion through the month. Awesome, man. Well, if you got a quick question, anyone out there, feel free to throw it in. Just to kind of sum up a couple things real quickly here. We got a few more minutes left. We're happy to do these monthly webinars. We love that we can give them to you for free. I'd love for you, though, if you're a pastor or church leader and you haven't done one of our 40-day challenges, or you haven't done all of them, we have 4 of them ready to go. After Easter, again, we talked about is a great time to do that. So in the offer on the side, we've got 10% off on any order on our website that reaches a certain threshold. But get those post-Easter orders in like this week, so you have plenty of time to promote. So you can check that out on the offer side. Next month, I'm pretty pumped about our webinar. I'm going to bring Cap Chatfield onto the podcast. I just recorded podcast last week. So the webinar, I'm going to bring Cap Chatfield onto the webinar. Cap is a kingdom entrepreneur, pastor, and content creator. Get this, in 2023, he started the year with 1,000 YouTube subscribers. And by the end of 2023, had more than 1 million. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the benefit of YouTube as a ministry for discipleship, and also get into the really practical secrets and tips of what he did, because a lot of us can do some of the things that he's doing. So that's going to be next month. It was originally scheduled for March 14th. We're going to push that back to March 28th. You're on the list, so you'll get all the information on that, church leaders. So that's going to be a really great one. Rich, hey, man, if people want to connect with you more, what is the best link for them to find you these days?
Yeah, just unseminary.com would be fine. My direct email is rb@unseminary.com. Roy asked an interesting question there around land is so expensive today. Are there connections or resources to receive donated land or finding inexpensive properties for churches? So that's an interesting question. So this is so related to like the rebirth church movement that's going on. So there are churches out there that are overcapitalized. That is, they have buildings that they're not using, or they're, like it's a 500 seat sanctuary and they have, 25 people attending. Roy, I would be pursuing those kinds of conversations. The what I've coached churches and the churches I've worked with, we've done is identify 30 or 40 churches in your area who might be in that situation, and literally send them a letter. And by letter, I mean like an actual, like physical letter, and mail them a letter that essentially says, hey, we're from XYZ church and we're looking to partner with other churches to work together for the kingdom, to try to help reach our community. And we'd be very open to conversations with churches that are looking for this kind of help, and then list 3 or 4 things that you could do as a church. Like, hey, maybe you've got like a worship band, or you've got like, you'd be willing to help with teaching, or maybe you run a great VBS and you would be open to helping other churches with the VBS, and list 3 or 4 different ways that you could help the church. So not like, we're looking for you to give us your building. That's not the email here. That's not the letter, but it's like, hey, we'd love to work together. And I think you'd be amazed at the conversations that would open up, time and again. You end up at doing stuff that you're maybe not entirely, like our church did this, and we're running Alpha at a church in the north end of one of our towns. There's 50 some odd people coming to that. Half of them are students, and we're partnering with the church to do it. They were like, we would love to run Alpha, but we need extra volunteers to help with that. We can do the meal. Could you guys help us with that? And we're like, fantastic. Now, I also happen to know that church they're one of these churches. They have a very large facility with not very many people attending, and are trying to figure out what they're doing next. We want to be just engaged in relationship with those people. How can we have a conversation with them? So that's like a whole other, that might be a bit mind bending there, but that would be an opening conversation anyways.
I love it, man. So helpful. You always are for all of us pastors and church leaders. And see, that's the sort of stuff that Rich knows. Like, he just knows his wealth of church growth, multiplication for the capital C church is just so expansive. So again, I'd love for you guys to continue to connect with him at unseminary.com. Check out his podcast, all that he has there. John, you asked if this webinar you can share with staff and leaders. Absolutely. We'll send an email right after the fact. If for whatever reason you don't get it, shoot us an email at hello@redletterchallenge.com. There'll be a replay link for you that we want as many people helped in this as possible. So feel free to send that to your staff and leaders. And also, it's good to see you, John. But really happy and grateful to do this for you guys. Thankful for your heart in ministry, that you are growing disciples, making disciples at your church, helping people see the real Jesus. And so, Rich, thanks a lot, man, for joining us on this month's Red Letter Leader webinar, bro. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys. Love what you guys are up to. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care, guys. Bye.
Take care.